Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is Gabe Hernandez, and today we have a review of Vampirella Dracula Rage number 5. And in this issue, Dracula and Victory finally catch up to Vampirella in Sweden, where Dracula's true intentions are revealed. But before we get started, please like, share, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell for notification. Your attention is greatly appreciated, and make sure to stay till the end for the final tally and the score. So let's get into it with the credits. Vampirella Dracula Rage number 5 is written by Christopher Priest. Art and colors by Christian Rosado. Letters by Taylor Esposito. And the main cover A, is drawn by Lucio Perillo. So let's recap where we left off before we get into this issue and where it heads into next. Dracula and Victory were hanging out in a hotel room in Sweden where Dracula basically gave Victory a kind of updated understanding of the lore about how vampires work. Everything from garlic to sunlight to turning into bats and everything in between. And it was kind of head trippy, but it was sort of interesting if you're talking about reimagining the vampire lore specifically for the Dynamite universe within Vampirella's line of comics. So it was kind of interesting. Meanwhile, Vampirella was tracking down members of the Lumia Ermitaori cult, which is the cult that is responsible for killing her newborn son, who is the son of Vampirella and Matthew. Now, when all that happened, eventually that put her on she wound up killing everybody in the cult, or at least everybody that was in that small town that was a member of that cult. And that led her to her final destination, which is where we are now in Sweden. So we pick up in Sweden, where Vampirella is riding a train to catch the last member of the cult that she can find, who happens to be daylighting, if you will, as a train maintenance worker or subway maintenance worker. Victory and Dracula realize that she is now in town because they happen to intersect and realize where she was headed. When Vampirella moves to attack the maintenance worker, who is a member of the cult responsible for killing her newborn son, he sets off an explosion in his that he's carrying with C4 explosives that he carries on his body as a suicide attempt to prevent himself from being captured. And that creates a train derailment under the subway. Dracula and Victory move to intercept, and Dracula takes a taste of Vampirella's blood, and that sets off a chain of events that leads to where the story is headed next. Before we do that, what's happening in between all that occurrence is you have two characters who Christopher Priest has nicknamed Hansel and Gretel for some bizarre reason that doesn't make sense to anybody but Christopher Priest, which is typical for most of his comics. Which is basically, we'll find out later that it's a brother and sister, and the brother did not approve of the sister's choice in potential husband. The husband to be, realizing that the brother would not approve, somehow wind up killing himself, and now the sister is trying to run away from her brother because she blames the brother for his death. During the explosion and the trail derailment, the sister is mortally wounded, and when Dracula and Victory arrive in the subway station to intercept Vampirella, Dracula finds this girl dying, and he decides to turn her to grant his brother's wish of not letting his sister die. Um, what does that have to do with anything with Vampirella and Victory? Absolutely nothing. But this is Christopher Priest we're talking about, so that shouldn't surprise anybody. Anyway, so what happens when Dracula finally does intercept Vampirella? He takes a taste of her blood because she's bleeding from the explosion, even though she's starting to recover pretty quickly. He uses that moment of weakness to taste her blood. Now that her blood is in his veins, he reaches out to Victory, says, and convinces her to activate a portal using the Belial ring, which is what they use to transport or teleport, I should say, into the subway. And now that Dracula has Vampirella's blood in his veins, the use of the Belial ring that opens up a portal opens up a new gateway into Draculon. And so now we have the intention of Dracula throughout this entire series is he wanted to get a hold of Vampirella's blood, consume it, and convince Victory to open a portal which transforms into a gateway leading to Draculon, so that way Dracula can go to Draculon and take over the planet for himself. So effectively, Dracula is intending to become the new ruler of Draculon in its current state, which occupies the same time space as the moon, but in an Complicated. Yeah. Okay, so that's the whole story. So everything leading up to this point is a version of Dracula wanted Vampirella's blood, and he needed to get it in his veins to mix with his blood, so that way when Victory opened in a portal in his presence, it would open up a doorway back to Draculon, so he could essentially get to Vampirella's home world and take it over. That's not a very complicated plot, but this is Christopher Priest who likes to make everything complicated. But that's where we are. Interesting fact about lots of pieces of this story and where they connect in to really understand that whole thing about Draculon occupies the same time space, but in an alternate reality version of our moon, and how the mad astronaut is from that alternate reality where the Earth, it wasn't called Earth, it was called Arcadia, and all that complicated, convoluted mess that would take a a large marker board to straighten out and explain to anybody. Check out Vampirella Interstellar. I mean, if you want to get complicated, that's where you need to go to get all the pieces put together. I can't say they were put together well, but that's where the pieces are. So have at it. Good luck to you. So what do we like about Vampirella Dracula Rage #5? The stakes. The stakes are the big deal here. So now that we know what Dracula's up to and his plan, okay, well, that's a big deal. Dracula finding a way back to Draculon so he can take the planet over, that's a pretty big deal. I don't know how well that's going to go because even though he's Dracula, I mean, you still have an entire planet of vampires and they're not exactly pushovers. So I'm curious to see where it heads, and that's a good thing. You want intrigue, you want anticipation, you want curiosity. Christopher Priest introduces an element that raises his stakes significantly and creates that curiosity. So that's a good thing. I mean, the journey getting there may be kind of bumpy and weird and convoluted and complicated and nonsensical at some points, but you get there. Negatives. Okay. Well, there are the negatives. It's complicated, confusing, and a bumpy ride to get there. The whole Hansel Gretel subplot is in there that it adds nothing to the story. It's just taking up space. It doesn't do anything. It has nothing to do with anything. But that's Christopher Priest. He likes to put things in there that don't mean anything for no particular reason. Focus, die way out of that one. Nope, there is no focus here. And so you just kind of have to kind of like, well, okay, first of all, the name of the cult, Lumiere Ermitoriori. I mean, I have trouble just saying it. So if you can't say it, you can't think it. It's a terrible name. The flow to get to this point is just convoluted, clunky, disjointed, complicated, unnecessarily confusing and weird. And that's just been the same with pretty much every series that Vampirella based that Christopher Priest is writing for Dynamite. We love Dynamite, but man, oh man, this is Priest Vampirella books are not fun to read. They're not entertaining. They're not enjoyable because you have to work to figure out what he's doing, and that's always a bad approach. Quick word about the art. So this is Christian Rosado, who's on pencils, inks, and coloring. It's scratchy but good. It kind of gives it a moody, macabre atmosphere, and I think that's the intention there. It's this very similar to Jonathan Lau, in the sense that he uses shadows and deep, heavy, dark lines to pump up the drama. But the cleanliness of the lines and the boldness of the colors are different. So some of the positives are the same from Jonathan Lau, but it's very much a Christian Rosado unique style, which is a good thing. So that's where we are with the art. So final thoughts. What do we think about Vampirella Dracula Rage #5 from Dynamite Comics? Starts to tie all the threads together to figure out what Dracula is up to with Victory, and now intersecting with Vampirella, which is a good thing. And the art's moody and atmospheric and macabre and gloomy, which is what you want for a kind of horror-based comic that is in this Gothic Vampirella range, which is good. But on the negative side, the road to getting here is convoluted, clunky, and very weird and unnecessarily complicated. And in typical Priest fashion, he throws in plot developments and subplots and things that don't mean anything, go nowhere, and have nothing to do with anything. So you feel like you're constantly distracted trying to follow a story that's already too confusing and not at all straight. So therefore, we're going to give Vampirella Dracula Rage #5 a 6.8 out of 10. I hope you enjoyed this review. Before you leave, please like, share, comment, subscribe to Comical Opinions for more reviews and analysis every week. You have a great day.